Joining us in our newsroom, we have Dr. Christopher Doring of Franciscan Health. We're always so happy to see him. Hi.
Hey, Mary, good to be with you.
Well, we have some good news here. The CDC just announced their recommendations for people who have been vaccinated so they can do some things. So what are in the recommendations? What can people who have been vaccinated with the coronavirus vaccine, what can they do? And are you surprised by any of them?
Yeah, no, this is great news and certainly something we had hoped would be the case. I don't think it's going quite as far as maybe some people had hoped, but it's a step in the right direction. And so basically the key take homes are if you've been fully vaccinated, and remember that's 2 weeks after the second dose of either Pfizer or Moderna, or now it'll be 2 weeks after the J&J vaccine, you'll be able to be around others who've been vaccinated without having to wear a mask. So that's really great. And then you can go visit loved ones or family members, whether they're vaccinated or not, and you don't have to worry about being masked in that setting. So again, two baby steps in the right direction, but I think it's exactly what we were hoping that we would start to see for people who are protected. Then the third major thing, which we've been hearing about for a few weeks now, is that if you are fully vaccinated and you have a close contact or exposure, you don't have to quarantine like unvaccinated people are supposed to at this point.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's interesting. So I wanted to circle back to one of the recommendations or what you had said earlier. So you've been fully vaccinated, but fully vaccinated only means that you've waited either those 2 weeks after your second dose or 2 weeks after that one Johnson & Johnson dose. I think that's really important that we remember that.
Yeah, that's exactly right. It does take, about 2 weeks to get maximum protection. And so in order to be confident in some of these changes, you need to make sure that you've allowed that full time for your own immunity to set in.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And so what are the things that the CDC says should remain the same?
Yeah, so otherwise, in general, try to avoid, being in big groups. You just don't know who's vaccinated, who isn't, who's a symptomatic carrier, who's an asymptomatic carrier, what might be spreading. So continuing to mask out in general public, or when you're around, other groups of people that you don't know or who aren't in their own sort of family unit, if you will. And then, there's still some guidelines about travel, minimizing the risk of either getting or spreading COVID. We just don't know everything there is to know yet about how well protected we are when we have been vaccinated. How low have we reduced the likelihood that we could be a spreader and not realize it? Those types of things. So until we have those answers, still going to be a number of sort of the basic recommendations in place for mitigating the spread of the virus.
So considering there's still a lot unknowns, there still remains a lot of unknowns, do you think these CDC guidelines are too loose, too restrictive? Where do you fall on sort of the spectrum here, just in your opinion?
Yeah, I mean, I think with people being vaccinated, it definitely comes with some benefits. And so the fact that we are seeing these official recommendations from the CDC does, I think, give people even more incentive, more motivation to be vaccinated. So from that standpoint, I think, it's a step in the right direction. And certainly we hope as we achieve more and more people vaccinated and get to that herd immunity, that'll allow us to loosen up much more in the weeks and months ahead.
Mm-hmm. So just a quick question. You mentioned herd immunity. I was just reading something just now about herd immunity, and there's a scientist saying we may never reach herd immunity, and this could be sort of turned from a pandemic into an endemic. Just any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, there are statistical analyses that would tell you when we would be achieving herd immunity and functionally have that widespread community protection. But there may always be a little low level spread of the virus, particularly when you're dealing with variants and variable levels of immune response to the vaccine. There will always be some people who can't get vaccinated for one reason or another, and there will be some level of vulnerability there. But by and large, I think the expectation is that the community spread will continue to drop as the vaccine rates go up. And, practically speaking, we should be able to achieve something that, if it's not officially, it looks an awful lot like herd immunity by sometime this summer.
Mhm. Well, let's hope so. And you just spoke about variants just now. So we now have, well, last week in Houston, they discovered the 5 variants that we now have on U.S. soil. We have the New York variant, Brazilian, South African, UK, and so we don't really know exactly how the Pfizer and Moderna vaccines respond to these variants. And I know now that they're doing testing, they're injecting these the coronavirus, these variants into the antibodies of people who have gotten these vaccines. So given that there's still so much unknown about these variants and just how these CDC guidelines were lifting things,
Right.
what are your thoughts on that? These variants are still so mysterious.
Yeah, I mean, there are a couple things there. One is the variants do seem to be a little more contagious, and so that may require higher rates of vaccination and or immune protection from a prior COVID infection to achieve herd immunity. So that does drive, what level you have to get to achieve that. But the other side of this is we are starting to learn how protective the vaccines are against these variants, and for the most part, it's been encouraging news. Still a lot to learn. We don't really know exactly how much more lethal these variants may or may not be. And so there are definitely some unknowns out there that we'll come to learn more about in the weeks and months ahead as well. But I think it's also important to keep in mind that there have been different variants all throughout this pandemic. This has not been a single virus that's the whole world has been exposed to. These genetic variations have occurred from the very beginning. It's just now there are implications for the vaccine and for the spread and how well protected people are that have already had COVID. Are they now vulnerable to a variant? That type of thing. So it does give us some pause and sort of focuses us to maintain vigilant in our efforts. But it also serves as yet more motivation to get everyone vaccinated as soon as possible.
Well, no, that's a great point. And I guess last thing, what would you say to the people who have not been vaccinated yet? They have not had their turn, they're in line, they're almost there, and it's almost like these people can
Yeah,
do this, but I can't. And do you think it's going to
right.
lax? I mean, do you worry about, or are you concerned about, should we be concerned about people laxing on the masking, maybe kind
Yeah.
of not following these guidelines because maybe someone else is vaccinated and they think they're okay? So your thoughts on those who just really want the vaccine, really want to engage in these things that these people who are vaccinated can do?
Yeah, I think the vaccine is such an important thing now that it's available and we have so many options, and we've given them to over 70 million people. So we have a huge basis of data now that suggests these are safe vaccines and they're proving to be very, very effective. Um, the vaccine is, important not only to protect yourself, and at this point, boy, what a tragedy it would be to get sick at this point when you could have been vaccinated and chose not to. It's one thing for 500,000 plus people to have died of this virus up until this point when it wasn't really preventable from a vaccine. But going forward, this is a vaccine preventable disease, and it's really it would be a huge tragedy for someone to get sick from COVID and die at this point, knowing that it could have been prevented with a vaccine. So I think especially for people who are high risk, and we're seeing them come out in huge numbers getting protected, but also then to protect the rest of our society as well. It's more important now more than ever to get that vaccine and establish your protection, and then we can again reopen, get back to business as usual.
Business as usual. You're right, exactly right. I mean, there's no need to succumb to this. We've learned so much. We have these vaccines. They're out there. And last 30 seconds, Dr. Doring, your message to Indiana, to Hoosiers.
Yeah, I mean, we've come so far so fast. The state's done a great job of establishing our highest risk populations to get the vaccine. And now that we're lowering those thresholds, we're getting down into younger populations. We're targeting others with other risk factors. Just couldn't be more proud of how things have gone in Indiana and the great work that a partnership that's happened between our state, our county health departments, and the hospitals and health systems to make this go as smoothly as it has and to get as many Hoosiers vaccinated as possible.
Mm-hmm. So some good news, really good news. Well, Dr. Doring, it's always great to see you. Thank you so much for your time.
Mary, it's great to be with you as well.